Hello and welcome to Tom Talks. Today we're going to continue on with our aerodynamic analysis of the 2022 F1 cars, and this portion of the car, the middle section, is what we'll really be focusing on today. And the middle section comprises of where the nose actually transitioned into the midsection of the bodywork. So you've got the driver there, the halo, what we're going to do with the side pod, also probably the most important part of the floor, which is the floor inlet, the fences there, and the lateral expansion into the actual floor edge, and I think what the teams are going to do in that region. So I've got some pretty cool CFD, and I'm looking forward to showing you what's going on there. Now firstly, let's get some of the more boring aerodynamics out of the way. Here we've got the mirror, and largely it's a fixed position. There's no fairings around it, I don't think, compared to what we've been seeing. Mirror, of course, is like a fixed position, so where it is and its angle, so you can't just get rid of it. It has to be there. Your mirror connection here has a bit more freedom to it. It obviously has to join on in a certain spot, but if you're looking to downwash over your side pod, you can 100% sculpt this structure to begin the downwash if you need to. Now you've also got the ability to put a little stay on the back of the mirror to the top of the side pod there, and off here there is a little bit of freedom as well, so you could roll up a vortex, which perhaps encourages some mixing down the side pod if you're doing the crazy downwash thing. Another thing to note here is the actual side pod itself, as you've probably seen, can go quite a bit forwards like this. There's a volume box for that. You don't have to fill it itself, and some of the other 2022 F1 car models that I've seen don't fill it. This could be potentially useful if you're minimizing your entry area and expanding, or if you've got some air that you'd like to clean up a little bit first before you begin to downwash it or move it around the side pod a little bit. Another thing to notice is you get yourself a little windshield here, which you can use if you'd like, and we've seen this through on each car. They've all got a little transparent shield in front of the driver, which blows up some air. Sometimes we see this on the cars, sometimes they actually take it off, and Merc and the Aston Martin have their cool little jagged one. One thing that we won't focus on too much is the actual driver section. This is because my Halo model and the general driver model around this region is pretty bad, so I don't think there's too much point analysing it. Furthermore, this whole top region of car, especially up above, is really quite dependent on packaging. I mean, the whole car is very dependent on packaging, but that section really is quite dependent on packaging. So, I mean, we can look at general airflow trends, but it's much easier to, when I don't know anything about F1 cars, unless you're an F1 team and you'd like to send me a model of everything except for your aero surfaces, that'd be great. But yeah, I don't know what the packaging's like. Let's get into the actual exciting bit, so the floor. Now I've drawn a line through the floor about there, and that's because we're really going to be focusing on this section of floor today. Now I know the whole floor acts as one, but the philosophy of the floor changes a little bit in that sort of region, so we'll start with that. Now in the top, here's the regulation model, so you've got this box here which is bounded like this. That's the regulation model for the floor itself, and as you can see, it's quite limited in its throat region. You've only got a little bit of area to play with in there. You have a bit of a choice onto how much expansion you can get, and the inlet area as well, you get a little bit of choice, and obviously the curvature. The floor that I've got does start quite up, go quite flat, and then you have quite a bit of a kick, come out and then kick back up again, so something like that, which is probably what we'll see most teams do. And I don't think it's very hard to use the extents of the volume in here. I think it's quite likely that a lot of teams are going to go maximum inlet, maximum outlet, lowest throat. It's going to be more so what sort of curvatures they pick in those areas. Another thing that I've included here is the lateral expansion of the floor. So as you can see at the back, this is just the floor, by the way, so not the fence model or not the floor edge model, just the actual floor itself. The lateral expansion at the back is pretty much fixed. So while the teams now can't go very high with their diffuser, they go crazy lateral. This time lateral is fixed, but you can go quite high, which is under the racing get cars to follow each other policy. So you will actually have in around about this region, you have a floor edge, what's described as a floor wing edge, and this is the region of the floor where you actually get two sections to work with. Everywhere else is one section. This basically means you can make some sort of a multi-element wing in that region, and this is quite obvious as to why you do that there, which we'll talk about a bit later on. Now, if we're looking at the floor from a theoretical standpoint, yes, it's highly likely that we're going to want to maximize our inlet area there. So we just cram in all the mass flow possible. The thing that's going to restrict you from putting your inlet up very high is if it's so high that you separate off the leading edge, because you can't downwash into it effectively with your front suspension. You're going to be wanting to use your front suspension to downwash your front wing into that region. The lower angle of attack your front wing is, the easier it is to be able to push air into this region without separating off the leading edge. Mass flow in this region, I think, is very, very crucial from a lateral standpoint and the vertical standpoint. These are two major parameters, I think, for downforce. The more mass flow you can push onto those fences in there, the stronger the vortex system in the car, the more downforce you're going to create. The challenge is managing the squirt in this region. Now, the general philosophy of the floor is we have these fences in here. So you're allowed up to 4 fences each side. There's a little bit of freedom with what you can do with them, but yeah, you're allowed 4 fences each side, and these push a lot of the tire weight outboard here. They expand a lot of this flow here, which is why you can see this light blue streak there. And they also, their main role is to generate a very powerful vortex which rolls through the floor like this, and ideally I think would keep going throughout the floor like that. Now, I did actually do 2 shots on this geometry. The second shot, this is the second shot, it wasn't as good as I'd hoped, but it comes down to modeling conditions and how you model things and what your packaging is like. So numbers really all aren't that important. Trends are much more important. And so here's the first model on the top side, and comparing to the bottom model on the second model on the bottom side there. Now, the only changes here are a very slight change in ride height, I think 4 millimeters or something, which will make quite a big difference. Ever so slight changes in front wing angle, so this one is a slightly more aggressive front wing, and this one, sorry, was slightly lower to the ground. And the big change here is the strake. So this is not at all, or the fence, this is not at all a perfect comparison. I changed multiple things because I just wanted to get a half decent model quickly. I mean, it's still not half decent, I mean, it's okay, but you know, I'm not a Formula 1 team. The biggest change here is the fence, and the only thing that really changed here is the inboard fence location, and you can see how massive the change is to the whole downforce of the car. Now, it's really this what's going on here, and I actually missed it the first time when I did the first iteration. I actually, before these cars were released, I've actually done a car before with a very similar tunnel system. It's a tunnel system which has been used in America quite a lot before, champ cars and stuff. I've done a car with a remarkably similar tunnel system, a very similar outboard fence, and 2 Vortex generators itself. So I had a rough idea of what I was doing. The difference is these cars have a really big central body section here, and what you can do is work the strake with that body system, and that's why we're getting such a big increase in downforce in our second case. We often think about a floor like this, so we've got some sort of an inlet, we expand, and we're going to create some load underneath there. Now let's say that our ground is actually a bit curvy, so something like that. Well, now we've just created assuming no separation, a crazy low pressure region in here, a bunch more load, and hey, that looks very, very familiar to what we've got in there. So you can see we're squeezing the airflow between the body and the strake. Now yes, this does mean that you're going to be producing your coefficient of pressure suction over a much smaller area, which area is related to force, considering a consistent coefficient of pressure, but the magnitude of coefficient of pressure is significantly higher, so in this concept we're actually better off running it closer to the central body, and will actually generate more load this way. Now this form of downforce it's not, perfectly ideal. It's a trade-off between how much area and what coefficient of pressure you are. It is, however, for a 1 iteration or 2 iteration car, a very easy and very quick way to generate downforce. I do not expect that we'll see anything this aggressive from Formula 1 teams at all, to be honest. Now I'll show you the flow field a bit more in detail. So I'll play a movie from the front of the car so you've got an idea, some slight commentary, roll up our outboard, vortices, so much inwash into the tyre, lots of squirt, downwashing of the tyre thanks to that device. Now we begin to get close to the floor. So you can already begin to see here's our outer fence here, and our squirt has migrated all the way inboard. So our good quality air, we've already used up quite a lot of it here. This is mainly because of the tyre and what the tyre does. Okay, now we begin to look at our fences. So with this, we've actually got quite a big band of quality airflow here. So we're not separating off the leading edge, even though we're downwashing on it quite aggressively, which will increase the localized pressure on top of it, which can induce losses over the top of your floor. We've still got quite a lot of high energy air there. We're not separating off the leading edge. That's okay. Now we are actually, separating just on this edge section where we can roll up a bit of a vortex. In this case, we've got a lot of dirty air going there, so it's not very powerful. Can the teams use that? I don't know, maybe they can roll up a vortex on that outboard section, keep it attached to the floor and feed the edge wing maybe. I suppose we'll see if they fillet it or keep it sharp. I think that they'd fillet it though. Now we're going to roll up a bit of loss here because the design wasn't very good. We fed quite a bit of loss, if I go back, fed quite a bit of loss into the actual floor there because of the front wing. It was poorly modelled and it gets pushed and squeezed, and yeah, it kind of looks like that. But we're still generally quite well off in this sort of region there for our downforce production. And now what we're going to see is, whoopsie-daisy, now what we're going to see is our wake here from our wheels get pushed outboard by our fences. So if I play through, there you go, so you can see we've just pushed it out a little bit there as we begin to expand. Now I should note, I didn't think that these cars would be that outwashy, so my refinement regions we're probably a little bit too close to the car, so we're entering zones there of quite coarse mesh, and typically when you have quite coarse mesh, CPT tends to, or low CPT tends to span a lot more quickly. So the modeling of the lower tire wake being pushed outboard, I think it gets pushed outboard far too much than it would be. This is purely my fault because I didn't think these cars would make as much outwash as they did, and I was trying to put maximum detail for the Vortex Floor roll-up. Anyway, speaking of, you can see there's our Vortex Floor roll-up. Now I should quickly explain. So we get 4 fences, including the outboard fence that we could use. You get up to a 50mm fillet, which you could use, but the fences need to be 50mm apart for memory. And the fence is considered a fence even where the fillet is. So you might have two fillets there, in which case the fences would be too close and you'd have to move them apart. You also get a little bit of freedom, so I've got them here vertical, but you can move them up to 25 degrees off the vertical axis. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sculpting up early on, whichever sort of way, to maximize generation, and maybe even a kick at the bottom there, which will affect your vortex production as you're pulling air up around that way. Like that, roughly. Actually, yeah, I think that having the curve on is typically what you see, but to be fair, that is more on an in-washy type device, like a front wing or something. So I suppose that we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little curve to them there. Now, as I play through more, you can see the lower weight get pushed away more again, and we begin approaching the undercut. Now we've already gone through the mirror, and here is our big roll up there. We've got some losses here. There would ideally be a fillet there, which would help out quite a lot. And now here's really our prime position of the floor, where a lot of this downforce is being generated. You can see how much happy, good quality air we've got in this region, and now let's really extract some performance from it. Where else do we have happy air? Well, we've also got good air here. Bit of a loss off the leading edge here, which isn't great, but it is what it is. So let's use this air and this air to generate some downforce, and it's fairly obvious what we're going to do. We're going to laterally expand this into our edge wing, where we're allowed the second section, put a wing there and generate some serious outboard loading. Now, to keep the car as simple as possible, I kept a flat floor edge, but you'll still see exactly what we should be seeing. So I'll continue playing. So I'll go back a bit and let you watch that again. I'll go back a bit and one more time. Okay, it's fairly obvious what's going on. We've got a lot of high CPT air here, a lot of high CPT air there, and we're going to outwash these down here and down there into this outboard section there. So I should show you again. You can see we're already beginning to kick up a bit of upwash there, and you've got this little slug of high energy air here, which is really going to want to go down there. We're laterally expanding it from those fences so much, and you can see it's just moved there, and moved there, and moved there. So I'll come back a bit. So on the top and the bottom, we're getting a lot of that lateral expansion. Now, one more time. Perfect. So what you've got here, you're laterally expanding so much, what you want to do is cut your floor there, get an element, and pop it in like that. This is something that we're very used to seeing, even on today's Formula 1 cars. In this region of floor, maybe a bit more more forward, sorry, we have massive lateral expansion, and you generate load on the outer edge of the floor, which hopefully people stop saying that F1 cars use vortices to seal their entire sections of floor, because this obviously isn't the case. If you got sliding skirts and put them on modern day F1 cars, you wouldn't cover the front sections because they generate so much lateral expansion and load as the air flicks up. Now, so in this situation, we're taking good quality air and using the undercut from the side pod to push air down in this region. Undercut to fill it first, and then side pod, as it widens out, we push air into that region to feed the slop gap. This would obviously be done quite cleanly. In this model, it's quite chossy. And then we extract some of the high CPT air from the lateral expansion from the fences and generate some outboard loading there. Now, before I talk about top side plate geometry, side pod geometry, I want to quickly mention why this is such a good idea. Now, a point of drag is worth a fair amount in Formula One. So if you can reduce drag for the same downforce, you're going to do it. And this device is doesn't produce much drag at all because pressure acts normal to a surface, and in this case we've got no surface except for the front and back edge actually pointing backwards if these are perfectly aligned with the flow. So if they're perfectly aligned with the flow, they generate a force that way. And if you imagine we're in a yaw condition, so we're in a steady state cornering condition perhaps, and we're going to be seeing air as we turn to the right. We're going to be seeing air coming in from the left-hand side. You'll notice that this is the case a lot of the time with these steady-state cornering conditions in Formula One cars, because you see the inside end plate vortex spool up more than the outside end plate vortex. So we know this is the case, and what this is going to do is encourage more cross flow from the floor and power up the inside floor edge wing a lot more. So I think it's almost 100% that every team is going to have an edge wing on their car. Maybe somebody will have the wiggly thing that we've seen on the Mercedes and the Aston, but they're going to have one of these wings, and I think optimization of these is quite important, and even some compromise for them, because they're a very drag-free device. Not completely drag-free because you're turning the airflow to use them, so obviously you can't just have a device with no drag, but it's a consequence. You can use it because you've already done the work to the air beforehand, so you may as well use it. And because we've got this cross flow in a yaw condition, you're powering up the inside one more, which counteracts lateral transfer, weight transfer, and also gives you a little bit, the drag force from it also gives you a tiny bit of centripetal in towards the corner. So there's a lot of small things, small details, which I think is why this device could really be focused on. You actually generate quite a bit of load off it. But we can't forget that our main source of load is the big vortex coming off the inboard fence. Another thing to mention, I don't know if they're going to combine fences, so you might be able to have a fence, and I'm pretty sure the rules allow something like that. I'm very keen to see what the teams do in this region, because it is roughly going to be dependent on how much squirt you can control. If I can't go back up to our inlet, this is squirt. This is bad. If I got rid of that squirt and made a front wing which actually worked, or put on an old F1 car front wing, or did my own design, the floor would be considerably better. It's all about managing this squirt, and it's going to be managing this in high yaw conditions, I think, for the cars. Now, I did mention that I talked quickly about the side pod. This is a very flat side pod. Also, the cooling, I didn't do internal flow here. I virtually opened up and put in boundary conditions so we don't just have flow ramming in, and I've got flow exiting the back where flow would normally exit out the back, but I decided that's much better to put my mesh count towards the floor vortex system and tire squirt and stuff like that. So look, this is quite dirty. This is from poor geometry around the driver. If you kept this clean, you could do what the teams do today and try to pull it down, provided the rules allow it with the specific radiuses that you need. And this would introduce more high energy flow at the rear end, help you with the beam wing, which is actually quite a powerful device in these cars, and that'll pump the whole floor because you put a low pressure right there. But we'll talk about that in the rear section video. One more thing with this Vortex is the way that you string it up, I think, is going to be quite important. I was too aggressive with my Vortex. If I come back to the original geometry, I think I was a bit too aggressive with this one. So it was a lot, with this one, it's very aggressive very, very quickly. It's generated a lot of coefficient of pressure, but it also breaks down a lot quicker. So by here, it's already broken down more. Here, it's going a bit stronger. The point being, if you optimize this geometry, you'll keep it intact more for longer, and you'll have bigger gains throughout the whole floor. Now, I think that this is part of the reason why in here, right in this crevice, we're not generating much load near the rear end of the car, because the Vortex has gotten a bit lossy there and is acting a little bit like blockage. In that region. You can also see that the first kick in the floor, because the floor does actually have a profile where it goes in, kicks up a bit, and then goes again. This kick here, which is here, is more powerful on that side than that side. I think that this is again to do with the Vortex and how the one on the lower, although it's producing a lot more downforce, is disrupting flow a little bit later on. So management of this Vortex is very, very important. If I play through the movie once more, you can also see laterally where it wants to go. It wants to bunch up and into that left side. So I'll go back through once more. You'll see it rolls up and wants to bunch into that left side. Now, I don't know if you want to put this outboard more. If you can, it's co-rotating with the Vortex that will be coming in later on to help seal with the tire and manage squirt in that region. But we'll talk about that in the rear video. So I don't know if you want to try push it outboard more, or if it's just naturally always going to want to come inboard. My guess would be to have it more in the middle of the floor. My guess would be to have it more in the middle of the floor, but that you're going to be compromising a lot of things based on how you can keep the Vortex structure strong throughout the whole floor in all conditions, and how strong you can make the structure in general. I think that you'll be compromising location for that, which is really the main downforce for the car. Quick coefficient of pressure slice here. You can see how really strong this system is. As we move down the car, it's much less powerful. I think that you could keep this going a little bit stronger. One more thing to add is above the driver airbox region. In these regulations for issue 2, you did get a tiny bit of room where you could put a little shark fin to gain some rear end high speed stability, like a weather vane. These are small gains, I think, and more so for driver confidence and drivability, not something that you really look at in a straight line CFD when there's already so many other fundamental issues with the car. Also, the packaging up high, the packaging around the car, but I mentioned before, specifically up high, I have no idea, so I just made the most generic car I possibly could, and that's why I haven't really talked about it much in this section. This section has mainly been about the floor and the downforce that we can produce, and as a general overview, power up that straight Vortex. It really starts though with the front wing. How do you manage the squirt? Do you have the squirt deflectors or the capturers really nicely positioned for all angles of steer and yaw? Are you managing the squirt when you have different rolls, because different amounts of inwash from your front wing will be coming in? and this is going to set up your package for the inlet to the floor. Alright, and that concludes this video. I'm sorry that I went rambling a bit towards the end. I typically do that. But generally the midsection there is a very important part of this car. I didn't really talk much about what the teams could potentially do to reduce drag in different conditions. What you can sometimes do is set up your car so that for the straights, when you're producing excessive load, your rear end drops down, you burst a vortex and you cull a lot of drag. That's what some of the teams can do, so I'd be interested to see if any such thing happens with the new regulations. In the rear section, we'll go over the overview of the car as well, because it's generally a shorter section. So I'll see you then.